Marcia nervously shifted from foot to foot, constantly fidgeting with the package of documents in her hands. She was terribly anxious as she was about to have a conversation with the company director. There was a janitorial position available in this company, and Marcia desperately needed the job. On the surface, becoming a janitor may seem trivial, but not for Marcia. The woman remembered her conversation with her neighbor from the day before. It was she who had accidentally stumbled upon the job advertisement. The neighbor turned out to be a compassionate person who cared about other people's hardships. She had witnessed Marcia's efforts to turn her life around and sincerely wanted to help her. "Thank you for your support. There's just one problem. I won't be accepted for the job with a record of early release from prison. I've tried so many places, and no one wants to hire me. No one wants those who have been in prison," Marcia said with bitterness in her voice. "But you should try. The most important thing is to take the first step. If you want to regain custody of your daughter, go and ask them to hire you specifically," insisted the neighbor. Tears welled up in Marcia's eyes at the mention of her daughter. "Yes, I will go. I will definitely go. And no matter what, I will get that position," she firmly resolved. Her thoughts were interrupted by the stern voice of the secretary. "You may enter. The director is waiting for you." Marcia quickly approached the door and entered the spacious office. Inside, she saw a haughty, lounging young man in a chair. It was evident that he took pride in his position and exuded an air of superiority. If only Marcia knew how right she was. This company had been inherited by James from his father, and he gladly continued the family business. Initially, it was not easy. Lack of experience, debts, and unprofitable projects. However, things soon turned around. James now had an office in the city center, steadily growing profits, authority, and top positions and rankings. From his great successes, James radiated and felt like a ruler of the world. He had one flaw, though. James despised spending money on others. Intellectually, he understood that the main part of his success depended on having a well-selected staff. Therefore, he paid specialists well for their work. However, he consistently economized on the service staff. He would often say, "These saved funds are also necessary. For example, my wife can buy herself lipsticks or something else from cosmetics." Due to this mentality, janitors at James's company were frequently fired, and there was a constant turnover in that position. There was a lot of work, but the wages were very low. "Oh, another candidate has come," James thought, observing the poorly dressed woman. "Hello, Mr. James. There's a janitorial vacancy in your company. I really need this job. Please allow me to work here," Marcia began the dialogue. "Please come in and have a seat. Why are you standing by the door? What's your name?" James asked. "My name is Marcia," she replied. "Do you have your documents with you? Let me see them. I hope you know how to mop floors and dust. No other skills are required. I need everything to be clean," the director quickly spoke, casually shuffling through the papers. Yes, of course, I know how to do that. Marcia couldn't finish her sentence as she saw the shocked look on the man's face. "What is this?" James angrily shook the release certificate from prison in front of her face. "I ended up there by accident. I was framed. But how does that matter for the job? I will excel in my responsibilities. Trust me," Marcia resolutely answered. Inside, everything was trembling for her. Marcia's heart sank. She understood that her last hope was fading away. But no, a thought flashed through her mind. "I will fight until the end and succeed." "Have you lost your mind? How dare you come here with this? You'll disgrace my company. Everyone will start gossiping about how I hired a former prisoner." James raised his voice. "Please, don't refuse me, I beg you. I need this job like I need air. It's a matter of life and death for me," Marcia pleaded, mustering her determination. James thought to himself that Marcia had put on quite a performance. Apparently, prison taught her acting skills, he pondered. James himself didn't understand what had come over him. That day, he was not just in a good mood, but an excellent one. Maybe it was because his company had made a huge profit yesterday. Or perhaps it was because James was soon going on vacation to the seaside. Well, I'm feeling generous today. I'll hire this woman. She won't last more than a couple of months here anyway, just like the previous destitute ones, thought James. All right, enough with the theatrics. I'm hiring you. But let me warn you, if you perform poorly or, God forbid, steal from someone, I will personally send you back to prison. Do you understand? Go and complete the paperwork in the HR department, he said, as if he was doing her a favor. Marcia was in such an emotional surge that the director's unpleasant words didn't affect her in the least. She happily hurried to the HR department. Unfortunately, her joy was short-lived. She excelled at her job. The office shone like the sun, and it became brighter inside. It was impossible not to notice. However, Marcia was belittled by the staff. Everyone was irritated by the fact that she was a former convict. They looked at her with open contempt and frequently stated, "How could the director hire a former inmate in such a prestigious company? She's going to steal from all of us. What is she wearing? Is that how they dressed in prison?" Every day, Marcia had to endure nitpicking, mockery, and blatant humiliation. She endured, swallowing her tears, and stayed silent. Marcia particularly disliked the deputy director, Sean. He considered himself both a king and a god in this place. It must be acknowledged that he was instrumental in elevating the company to the high level. Sean was smart, energetic, and full of ideas. However, ambition, greed, and an exceptional self-love still prevailed in his character. He couldn't stand competition, adored any signs of attention to his person, and controlled everyone harshly. And most importantly, he simply dreamed of occupying the director's chair. "I should be in this position, not that stupid James. We do everything for him and he only reaps the profits," Sean exclaimed. Sean constantly pondered how to achieve his desired goal. Start his own company? No, it wouldn't work. He received a good salary, but starting a business from scratch required a lot of money. There was only one option left: to undermine the director. That's exactly what Sean planned to do when the right moment came. For now, he played the obedient servant, showing paternal care for the work and the team. "James, why did you hire Marcia? The staff is worried. People don't change. Don't you understand that? I found out some information about her. She was convicted for theft and in a similar company. How could you hire her without at least finding out what she was convicted for?" Sean insisted. "Sean, why are you bothering her? Look at how clean the office has become. No janitor has ever cleaned it like she does. She works for pennies but performs the job as if it were a royal palace. Besides, she mentioned that she was framed. Maybe it's true," James responded. These persistent attacks from Sean had tired the director. "That's the problem. It's inaccurate information. She shouldn't have appeared here," Sean argued. "Sean, stop talking nonsense. Let's go and celebrate our yesterday's revenue. We shouldn't be feeling down. We have million-dollar contracts ahead, even with foreign partners. We're reaching a new level, my friend. We'll soon live like kings never dreamt of. And here you are talking to me about some janitor? Get her out of your mind," James insisted. Sean wanted to get these thoughts out of his head, but he couldn't. His intuition told him that he needed to get rid of this poor individual. "I'll make her leave on her own," he decided. He did everything in his power to create unbearable conditions for Marcia and the company. "Why did you sneak into our office? You're embarrassing us. You don't belong in polite society. Don't you dare touch my desk and belongings with your dirty fingers. Leave," Sean persisted. He couldn't think of any more insults to throw at Marcia. However, he didn't realize that it was all in vain. After being betrayed by loved ones and spending time in prison, Marcia's soul had hardened and seemed to have turned into armor. No one could penetrate this armor, especially not Sean. "I'm like a soldier. I'm just doing my job," Marcia said to herself. Only one thought touched her heart: her worries about her little daughter, Andrea. "Perhaps she won't remember me anymore. 5 years have passed. What was the point of it all? How could I have been so naive?" Marcia thought, tears welling up. That's how a whole month passed, filled with work and the burden of past memories. Another workday arrived. It was unusual. The office was noisy from the early morning, like a factory workshop. All the employees were bustling around like mad, preparing for the arrival of a foreign delegation. The day before, Mr. James had instructed Marcia to clean all the offices to perfection. "Hey, janitor, start with my office. I need to step out," Sean said disdainfully, and left. Marcia loved cleaning the offices. The books, folders, neatly arranged on the shelves, it all felt so familiar to her. And when she saw the documents neatly stacked on the desks, she had a desire to sit at the computer and immerse herself in the world of numbers, tables, and calculations. In the past, Marcia used to prepare hundreds of contracts and perform various calculations, but that was in her previous life. But now, Marcia let out a heavy sigh. The cleaning was done. Suddenly, her gaze involuntarily fell on a gray folder that stood out from the neat stack of documents on the desk. A sheet of paper had been carelessly thrown into the folder. Marcia knew she shouldn't be interested in other people's business, but she couldn't resist her curiosity. It was a clever financial calculation with numerous numbers. Quickly scanning the document, Marcia felt that something was amiss. She wasn't accustomed to relying on intuition. Grabbing a calculator, her sharp mind confirmed that this document was a clear manipulation. Her unease heightened when she noticed today's date on the reverse side. And today, important business negotiations and a major deal were scheduled. Marcia immediately remembered how she had been a victim of a similar setup. "I must inform Mr. James immediately," she thought. She had no doubts about it. Under no circumstances would Marcia wish anyone the same fate that had befallen her. She concealed the folder in a bag with cleaning supplies and, looking around, headed to the director's office. Mr. James was occupied the entire day. It was catastrophically difficult to reach him. The secretary rudely chased Marcia out of the reception area several times. "Now is not the time to be waving your mop around here. Get out of here," the secretary exclaimed. "I don't need to clean. I need to see Mr. James immediately." Marcia stood her ground without flinching. "You're getting on my nerves. Mr. James has forbidden anyone from entering today. It can only be done with his call," the secretary persistently insisted. Marcia no longer heard her words and, as if possessed, rushed toward the office door. When her hand touched the handle, the secretary jumped up and tried to block her path. Suddenly the door swung open, and Mr. James, with a furious glint in his eyes, shouted at them. "What are you yelling about? Stop immediately. Today I have a business meeting with foreign partners. Why isn't my secretary fulfilling her duties? I specifically asked not to let anyone in. If you ruin this meeting for me, I'll fire you to hell." James couldn't control his emotions. The director directed his anger toward Marcia. "What are you doing here? I don't want to see you, especially not today. Leave," he said. "No, I won't leave, Mr. James. I really need to talk to you. Can I come into your office?" Marcia disregarded the director's hurtful remarks. James even trembled with tension. It felt like he was capable of anything. Marcia even felt as if the director was about to spit in her face, but not a muscle in her flinched. Life had toughened Marcia to the point where no anger could scare her. Marcia silently walked past the director and entered the office. He had no choice but to do the same. "You have 1 minute. "Well, what do you need now? Is it another matter of life and death for you?" the director grumbled discontentedly. "Oh, yes, Mr. James. Please listen to me. It concerns the new deal. Your deputy, Sean, is setting you up. He altered the company's financial figures and wants to tarnish your reputation in the eyes of the partners, all to get rid of you and take your place. I have evidence here," Marcia said, extending the folder with the documents to the director. James reddened and slammed the folder forcefully onto the table. "How dare you slander decent people? Sean is talented, intelligent. He's the brains behind our company. He's my true friend. And who are you? You're a thief. Have you remembered your criminal tendencies? Sean was right, 1,000 times right, when he said we shouldn't have hired a former convict. And I, the idiot, didn't listen to him. But now I'll correct that mistake. Write your resignation letter today," the director yelled. Marcia didn't expect such a reaction at all. She thought the director would be interested in her revelation, and if he didn't believe her immediately, he would at least request an investigation of the documents. But he was so blinded by the success of the company and believed in the crystal clear honesty of his employees that he refused to accept anything that dispelled that myth. "You're still here? If you don't leave this office within 3 seconds, I'll call the police," the director heatedly threatened. Marcia obediently walked toward the door. But suddenly, she turned around and said, "Mr. James, give me just 1 day, and I'll prove that I'm right." "What do you know about business, let alone financial matters? You're just a cleaning lady. Your place is next to the bucket and mop," the director sneered. The director still didn't believe Marcia, but she didn't give up. "Just trust me. I am completely certain of what I'm saying. I haven't been a janitor all my life." Suddenly, the director's expression changed, and his voice softened slightly. After a moment of silence, he said, "Well, let's suppose I agree to your absurd adventure. If all this turns out to be slander, I won't just fire you, I'll press charges against you. Then even cleaning jobs won't take you, and you'll be begging outside the church. Do you understand?" "Yes, of course. I need the company's financial statements for the past few years and the financial documents related to the New Deal," Marcia calmly replied. "All right. Wait. What am I going to tell our foreign partners? They'll be here today," James asked. "Well, come up with something. They'll be in town for more than just 1 day. Give them a warm welcome, discuss future collaborations, hint that serious deals aren't made so quickly. We need to reconsider. Everything will be ready, but tomorrow. Something along those lines," Marcia shrugged. James simply nodded in response and watched Marcia closely as she walked to the door. It's amazing how someone with her intelligence and integrity ended up in prison. I just can't believe it, he thought, hoping that everything the cleaning lady had said was untrue. Marcia first stealthily walked into Sean's office and put the folder back. Fortunately, Sean hadn't returned yet, and when he did, he, of course, didn't notice anything suspicious. He didn't suspect a thing, even when James announced that the contract signing would be postponed until tomorrow. Sean had no doubt that his plan to frame the director would work perfectly. For the remainder of the day, Marcia dutifully carried out her cleaning duties. When all the employees went home, she entered the accounting department and spent almost the entire night there. Financial transactions, calculations, contracts flashed before her eyes. It was an endless stream of numbers. Finally, her efforts paid off. Her concerns regarding the upcoming deal were confirmed. But that wasn't all. She managed to expose Sean's criminal machinations. Not only was he trying to set up the director on a large scale, but he was also embezzling the company's funds. It was strange that nobody had noticed it before, or maybe they just didn't want to see it. The next morning, Marcia, tired with bags under her eyes, but satisfied with herself, arrived at the director's reception area. "I need to see Mr. James," she said. "You again? Aren't you satisfied with yesterday's incident? Do you want to cause another scandal?" the secretary protested. "Please call the director. Let him know that Marcia is here." "Mr. James, that Marcia is here again. Should I not let her in?" the secretary asked. "No, let her in," James calmly replied. The flustered secretary nearly dropped the phone and watched in astonishment as Marcia entered the office. "You're here again so soon. It hasn't even been 24 hours, Mr. James said. He wasn't as enraged as he was the day before, but his demeanor clearly showed that he wasn't particularly pleased with Marcia's arrival. James felt a pang in his heart as soon as he saw her. His brain refused to believe that unpleasant and even criminal activities could be happening behind his back. He was completely unprepared for such a turn of events. "Mr. James, I have examined the documents. My conclusions have been confirmed. I will explain everything to you now," Marcia decisively said. James's legs weakened and his breath caught. He alternated between blushing and paling, as Marcia attempted to convey the bitter truth to his consciousness using the copies of documents she had prepared. "That's it. I'm finished." "Mr. James, what's wrong with you?" she asked when she saw the director clutching his head in his hands, his gaze fixed on a single point. Nothing. I'm fine. Everything you said sounds convincing, but I will verify it. Leave the documents here and go back to your work. Attend to your official duties, James said. Of course, Mr. James. Marcia hurried toward the exit. In the corridor, she bumped into Sean, who looked at her with disdain. Good morning, the secretary greeted him with a smile. Is the director in his office? Sean smirked in response. Yes, please, go ahead. James wanted nothing more than to grab Sean and mercilessly beat him for betraying him. After all, he had always trusted him implicitly, but the man managed to control his emotions. It was too early to draw conclusions and wholeheartedly trust Marcia. He had known Sean for many years, while this cleaning lady had only been around for a few days. James found the strength to smile and shake Sean's hand, and then, as if nothing had happened, they began discussing business matters. Marcia barely made it through the rest of the day. The sleepless night had taken its toll on her fatigue. When she arrived home in the evening, her legs were throbbing with pain. Marcia collapsed on the couch and fell into a deep sleep. It was a blissful dream. She was with her daughter, Andrea, whom she had been cruelly separated from for many years. Marcia couldn't believe her eyes when she came to clean Sean's office as usual in the morning. The man was a terrible stickler for cleanliness. He loved order. If he even spotted dust, he would go into a frenzy. But instead of a well-maintained office, Marcia found herself in a real dump. Shreds of torn documents were scattered everywhere, piles of folders and books were strewn about, and there was a heap of cigarette butts on the desk. Sean never allowed himself to smoke in the workplace. Within seconds, Marcia trembled all over from the shouts of Sean coming from behind the door, resembling the roar of an enraged lion. She quickly rushed out of the office, trying to avoid crossing paths with him. She understood that something extraordinary had happened in Sean's life, though she could only guess what. Marcia didn't rejoice in her triumph. She simply wanted justice, just as she did in the year when the dearest thing was taken from her life. Her thoughts were interrupted by the shout of one of the women working in the office. Hey you, go see the director. Everyone started whispering, unable to even guess why Marcia was summoned by the director. Hello, Marcia. Please come in, Mr. James kindly said. Marcia was stunned. The director had never called her by her name. She was always addressed as hey, or at best, you. The director's subsequent words shocked her, and she couldn't immediately believe her ears. I'm very grateful to you for these documents and for figuring them out. If it weren't for you, I would have lost the company, been in debt, and maybe even had legal problems. I didn't expect this from my deputy. Thank you so much. Now it was Marcia's turn to blush and pale, even though she hadn't done anything supernatural, just uncovered the truth for Mr. James. Well, Marcia, don't worry so much. I should be the one apologizing for my sometimes unworthy behavior towards you, Mr. James reassured her. No, don't apologize. You've done so much for me by hiring me. After all, former convicts are usually not even taken as janitors, Marcia replied quietly. How did you end up in prison? I should have asked about it earlier. Perhaps then my attitude towards you would have changed immediately. The director couldn't resist and asked. It's a long story. Marcia didn't expect such a question. Nevertheless, please tell me. You don't look like a hardened criminal, James persisted. Marcia fell silent for a moment. The memories brought her pain, but she found the strength to continue the conversation. I used to be the wife of a successful businessman and the chief accountant in his thriving company. I had a beautiful home and an ideal family, a loving husband and a little daughter. Marcia fell silent again, lowering her gaze. And what happened? James asked. One day, uniformed people came into my office, provided evidence of financial manipulation, and took me to the precinct. I only found out the details from the lawyer my husband hired. It deeply shocked me that he showed no interest in my release, despite it being our shared business. I handled the finances, and he was perfectly fine with it. I trusted him completely, and he... Marcia was overwhelmed by the memories with renewed intensity. It took a lot of effort for her to not burst into tears, but she managed to control her emotions and continue. My husband simply quietly embezzled our joint funds, and then, together with his mistress, who happened to be my friend, they decided to eliminate me. They succeeded splendidly. That's tragic. You were a professional in your field and didn't notice the deception? How did it happen? James exclaimed. He genuinely felt sorry for Marcia. I was simply blinded by my family happiness. I loved my husband and signed many documents he gave me. He always said it was for the company. The worst part is that while I was in prison, they stripped me of my parental rights. That's why I need a job and a good recommendation to at least have a chance to see my little girl. Tears welled up in Marcia's eyes as she remembered her daughter. James sincerely empathized with her grief. Sensing how heavy it was for Marcia, he said, "Perhaps we can have a cup of coffee to calm down, and I also have a business proposition for you." Yesterday, as soon as this nightmare was confirmed, he made the decision to hire Marcia as his deputy. As for Sean, who had pretended to be his friend and partner for so many years, he wanted to dismiss him without remorse. "Marcia, I'm offering you the position of deputy director." Marcia hesitated, not knowing what to say. "I fired Sean. He's a fraud. I'm offering you his position. Are you willing?" the director asked. Marcia pondered. It was difficult for her to make such an important decision right away. James noticed her hesitation. "Don't worry, Marcia. I have confidence in your abilities and can entrust you with this position. Accept it. You need a good job and recommendations. Tomorrow I will introduce you to the team." All night long, Marcia tossed and turned. Her mind was filled with a swarm of chaotic thoughts. Will she be able to handle it? How will the team react? They'll all hate her. And what about her appearance? She needs to match the high position. She doesn't even have the money to buy a decent suit and shoes. Fortunately, Marcia's neighbor came to the rescue again and lent her some clothes. The next morning, Mr. James gathered the entire company to introduce the new deputy. Everyone was waiting in anticipation. Finally, the doors of the conference room opened, and all eyes turned to the elegant, pleasant-looking woman. She walked confidently through the room and sat next to the director. For a few seconds, complete silence prevailed. James broke the silence. "Dear colleagues, allow me to introduce my new deputy, Marcia. Please welcome her." A disapproving whisper spread through the room. "She's our janitor. It can't be. Look at her. She's quickly seduced the director." The office buzzed with discussions for the entire week. However, after the director's unfavorable remarks towards the negligent employees, the gossip quickly ceased. Marcia enthusiastically threw herself into her work. She worked diligently, studied the documents, and left the office last, arriving early in the morning. It became evident that the former deputy hadn't been particularly concerned about the company's affairs lately, as his own status took priority. Marcia's efforts paid off. The company's affairs noticeably improved. After another successful deal, Mr. James called Marcia into his office. "Congratulations, colleague. We're signing a new contract, and you played a significant role in it," James said, smiling happily. "I'm very glad," Marcia replied. "That's not all, Marcia. I gathered information about your ex-husband. He turned out to be an incompetent entrepreneur and went bankrupt. I've hired the most competent lawyer in town for you. He says you're currently in a favorable position, and you have a good chance of regaining parental rights for your daughter." Marcia wanted to cry for happiness. She didn't expect such a truly noble gesture from James. Marcia had experienced her husband's betrayal, endured the hardships of prison life, and achieved rapid career growth. And now she would regain her daughter no matter what. This would be her ultimate victory.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.